Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Grow Through It podcast. My name is Julia, and today we will be discussing trauma and the best things I've found to help heal it. Before we start this discussion, I just wanted to make a little side note. I bought a new podcast microphone and I'm using it for the first time today, so I hope it sounds okay. I may still have to play around with it more. Also, I am currently sipping on an oat milk matcha latte I made. The company I have a business with just came out with a new matcha powder with MCT oil, and it's so good. I was never a matcha fan before, but I just mix it with oat milk and a little bit of honey, and it's amazing. So just wanted to share that because I'm obsessed. Let's get started on today's topic. Just a disclaimer before we start, I am not a therapist or an expert. I highly recommend going to a licensed therapist if you are dealing with trauma. The things I'm going to share with you are just my opinions on what has worked for me and what I have learned about. Again, I recommend going to a mental health professional for treatment and advice. So if you have dealt with trauma before, first of all, just know that you are not alone. I have learned over the years it is actually a lot more common than I thought. Many people I have talked to have dealt with some form of trauma, whether it's little t or big T trauma, as they call it. Big T trauma is any life-threatening event that causes psychological distress, such as violent crimes, natural disasters, car accidents, death of a loved one, or assault. Little T traumas are chronic or repetitive experiences that have caused emotional or psychological damage. These include breakups, losing a job, bullying, criticism from family members, financial stress, divorce, or the death of a pet. But in my opinion, the death of a pet is more of a big T trauma, or at least it was for me. Losing my dog was one of the worst things I've ever experienced, and I still think about him every single day almost 2 years later. Whether you have little or big T trauma, it is all important, and the more little T trauma you have, it can accumulate to become just as significant as a big T trauma. I think sometimes people think little T trauma is less significant, but all of it matters and it can affect people in different ways. I have both big and little T traumas, and I have found myself comparing what I went through to other people's experiences. Thinking what I went through was not as bad as what others went through, so it must not be as important. But that is simply not true. It does not matter what you went through. If you were affected by it, you deserve to get better from it. Some things to know about trauma. The early years of life are critical. If there is any kind of trauma or abuse, even if you were only an infant and have no memory of it, your body has a memory of it, and it can affect you significantly. Trauma can literally alter your brain. You may have suppressed your trauma or even memories, but it still affects you regardless of whether or not you remember it. It takes time to heal trauma, but remember that it does not define you and you do not have to live with it forever. Some things may affect you long term, but there are coping strategies and therapies you can do to help. Lastly, you have to want to get better. If you're just turning a blind eye and telling yourself you're fine when you know you're not, you are not helping yourself. You have to want to get better in order to heal. Trauma can show up in several ways. Obviously, every person is different, but I wanted to share a couple of the physical ways it can show up in your body. So more obvious ones include depression, anxiety, fatigue, and sleep problems. You may also have obsessive thoughts. Another big way it can show up that I think is less known is chronic pain. Our bodies hold on to so much, and that can show up as tension and pain. There is actually scientific evidence of this, but there is also a spiritual side to it as well. I'd recommend looking into the book called Heal Your Body by Louise. It is so interesting how physical manifestations can occur from mental issues. For example, earaches and ear infections can manifest from a lot of arguing in the family. The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel Kolk is another great book that looks at the science behind how the body is affected by trauma. I just finished the book and I highly recommend everyone read it. It was so interesting and eye-opening and I learned a lot from it. Other books I'd recommend reading are It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wolynn, which is about generational trauma and how that can affect you, as well as When the Body Says No by Gabor, which is about how disease or illness may show up in the body from stress or neglected emotions. I talked more in depth about these books in the episode I did reviewing my 2024 books I read. It is just so interesting learning about how your body can respond to trauma, stress, and emotions. It's truly incredible, and once we can understand this, we can start to heal it. I want to share a few of the things that I have learned from these books, as well as what I've done myself to help cope with my trauma and begin to heal it. So first of all, as I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, is going to therapy. I have gone to therapy on and off for years now. It took time to find the right therapist for me, but I am really happy with my current one. I feel like she validates my feelings, gives me actual solutions or coping strategies, and we are going to be starting EMDR, which is something I've always really wanted to do. So I have done talk therapy, hypnosis, and EFT tapping with previous therapists. I feel like all of these have been really helpful. Obviously, talk therapy is super beneficial, but I feel like once you reach a certain point, you need more than that, especially if you've gone through trauma. Hypnosis was really beneficial for me as well. We did some childhood work through hypnosis, and it truly made me feel so differently about who I was as a child. I used to look at photos of myself when I was little and laugh at what I looked like and was embarrassed of the things I did. But after the hypnosis session we did, it opened my eyes to what that little girl went through, and all I wanted to do was comfort her and love her. I never say anything negative about my childhood self anymore, and I think it really helped heal a part of me. EFT tapping is also super interesting and beneficial. It stands for Emotional Freedom Technique, and what you do is you tap on specific points on the body, usually your face or neck or collarbone, and state certain things while tapping. It combines Chinese acupressure and psychology. It is used for stress and anxiety, trauma and PTSD, phobias, chronic pain, and negative beliefs or self-limiting beliefs. I know in some schools they use it with the kids before class starts, and it completely changed how those kids behaved and coped with issues. I did it with my previous therapist, and some of the fears I had went away, and some of the things I used to blame myself for or hated myself for went away too. It was really incredible. I haven't done EFT tapping in a while, but you can truly do it for any situation or emotion. There are a lot of videos on YouTube for guided EFT tapping sessions that I would recommend looking at. I will also let you know how EMDR goes, but after reading The Body Keeps the Score, I am very excited to start it. There was a whole chapter on EMDR in the book, and it was mentioned in several other chapters too. Based on what was said in the book, it is life-changing for people, even those with PTSD. I am really hoping it helps me be less triggered and stop having negative thoughts about certain things. In my previous relationship, a lot of stuff was kind of ingrained in me, and I was made to believe I wasn't good enough as I am, and a lot of really awful beliefs about how I should be still stick in my head today. It affects all aspects of my life, and although it's gotten a lot better, I would love for it to go away or lessen even more. I really think EMDR will help with this. Reiki has also been very healing for me. Getting Reiki done and performing Reiki on others has been amazing. I've been able to release things I'm not sure I could have without it. Sound bowl sessions have had a similar effect on me as well. Using sounds for healing can be so incredible to release things and bring in more positivity. If you've never tried either of these, I'd highly recommend trying it. I do Reiki sessions in person as well as distance. Another thing I found to be helpful is meditation, breathwork, and journaling. These mindfulness practices are proven to reduce anxiety and obsessive thoughts and can help you cope with trauma. Often, when I'm feeling triggered, I will focus on my breath and practice deep and slow breathing. I will either do this on my own or with a meditation. Breathwork can be so beneficial. When I went to the women's festival that I've mentioned a couple times, we did breathwork at a few workshops, and the amount we all released was wild. People were sobbing like babies, screaming and shaking. Breathwork is so powerful. I have also found it very helpful to write down how I am feeling about something. For example, just the other week I got triggered by something that was said to me that reminded me of my past. I started to panic, my breathing increased, and I started to cry. I got out my journal, and literally just the act of writing out how I felt completely calmed me down, and I was able to regulate my emotions again. Meditation has also helped reduce my anxiety and helped me be more in the present moment. Often I start to panic because I am thinking about the past or the future and not focused on the present moment. Meditation has helped me come back to the present, and I am able to cope better with my emotions. Journaling, breathwork, and meditation are such simple tools to help you. They don't take long. It can literally be 2 or 3 minutes, and you can do it anywhere. If you start getting panicked, go to the bathroom or a quiet room and focus on your breath. If you need to put on a guided meditation, you can do that. You can also carry your journal with you or just use the Notes app on your phone if you don't have your journal. Similarly to breathwork and meditation, yoga is also extremely beneficial. In The Body Keeps the Score, they actually have a whole chapter on yoga and how it has helped trauma patients. Yoga combines movement, stretching, breathwork, and often meditation. Yin yoga in particular is something I have found to be helpful for me. Holding poses for long periods of time will get deep into those tissues, and we store a lot of emotion and trauma in our body, as I mentioned earlier. Our hips store a lot, especially for women, so many people find when they do hip stretches in a yin class, they start to cry or get angry. That is your emotions releasing. In the book, he also described how patients with a history of sexual trauma really struggled with hip opener stretches because it is a vulnerable position. But once they got more comfortable, they were able to do those hip openers and release some trauma, as well as be comfortable being vulnerable. This can translate to being comfortable being vulnerable in day-to-day life as well. Movement itself can be very healing. Exercise is another great way to move that energy through your body. I know when I am not exercising, I am a lot more down and moody. When I exercise, I feel happier and more optimistic. This can be any form of exercising. Walking, running, biking, weightlifting, Pilates, whatever you enjoy. Dancing or just shaking your body is also something you can try. This is a part of something called somatic therapy. Somatic therapy focuses on the mind and body and how those relate to emotional and psychological issues. It works on unresolved trauma, stress, or emotional experiences that are stored in the body and works to release them. So in somatic therapy, you may focus on how your body feels and what sensations you feel in your body when you think about a certain thing. You may use breathing exercises, movement and postural adjustments, body scanning, or shaking. Shaking can be used to release stored tension, stress, or trauma within the body. I'm sure you've noticed that animals often do this. They shake when they are stressed, and they do this naturally. Shaking can help you get out of the fight, flight, or freeze state and bring your nervous system back to a balanced state. It can also promote relaxation and calm the body after stress. This is another thing we did at the Women's Festival in certain workshops. We used shaking and dance as a way to release our emotions and energy. It was really cool to feel how different my body felt after and how freeing it was. Another thing I actually just learned about through reading this book is that theater and acting can help trauma patients. I found this so interesting. They used it in certain trauma patient programs, and they acted out real-life scenarios, and it gave the patients a way to safely express how they would react to those scenarios. They also used it with those who were getting in trouble with the law, and it helped them too. Acting is a great way to express emotions in a safe environment and also see what it feels like to be a different person. How would this happy character I am playing react to this? I found this really interesting. So these were all the ways that I have learned or done myself to help cope with trauma. To recap, first of all, if you have any trauma, the first step would be finding a licensed therapist. This may take some time for you to find the right one. If you don't vibe with them, find a new one. Many therapy programs will do a questionnaire to find the right therapist for you, and then you can look at all their credentials and history of therapy and decide who you want to see. The program I use also lets you do a free 15-minute consultation with therapists to see if you like them. Like I said, it took me a while to find the right therapist for me. She is my fourth one. So if you don't like yours, don't feel discouraged or that therapy isn't for you. It takes time, and don't settle for someone you don't like. You can also ask your therapist what modalities they use. If you're interested in EFT tapping, hypnosis, or EMDR, which again I'd highly recommend, ask your therapist if they do those things. If they don't, maybe look elsewhere. I would also recommend reading the books I mentioned. I will write them in the show notes for you. For sure, read The Body Keeps the Score, and then depending on your interests, I'd recommend It Didn't Start With You or When the Body Says No. These books will really help you understand trauma better and give you coping strategies as well. Reiki and sound bowl sessions are something you can look into. They literally just require you to lay down or sit and just relax. You don't have to do anything, just keep an open mind. Meditation, journaling, breathwork, exercise, yoga, or any sort of movement like dancing or shaking are very simple things to try as well. Make sure to check with your therapist first, though, to make sure these things are right for you. If it is severe trauma, you may need to be supervised while doing some of these things to make sure you are safe. I hope this episode has helped you learn some different ways to cope and also encouraged you to try therapy if you haven't already. Having trauma can be extremely difficult to navigate, but it is encouraging to know that you can find coping strategies and even heal that trauma. If you try any of these things or have experiences with any of these things that I mentioned, I would love to hear about it if you're comfortable sharing it. You can message me on Instagram. If you found this episode helpful or know of someone who may find it helpful, it would be great if you could rate and review this podcast and share this episode with them. I really just want people to know that they are not alone and give them hope that things can get better. They definitely have for me. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode and supporting my podcast. If you want to chat further about this topic, or again, want to share your own experiences with me, you can message me on Instagram at growthroughit.pod. As always, remember that you are worthy. See you next time.